This right here is why I love anime. And this right here is why Made in Abyss is truly the best of them all. I cannot for the life of me actually articulate how this episode made me feel. For the first time in my life, I actually finished an episode of anime and I let out the biggest sigh of relief. And at the end of that sigh, I uttered the word, perfect. Chapter 55 is my all-time favorite chapter, and it's what I feel Made in Abyss is truly all about. It's emotional at times, as well as very strange. It's powerful, yet incredibly disturbing, but above all else, it's just an incredibly endearing and beautiful story. And Kinema Citrus, man, they knew the task, and without even a falter, they blew this out of the park. This is not just my favorite episode of the year, but I think, if I'm honest, my all-time favorite episode of anime period. As biased as I am towards the series, I've never once found myself in my 300 plus anime endeavor, never felt so swayed by a single episode. Like, God, dude, I literally cannot formulate this script properly, so for the most part, I'm actually just going to be speaking from my heart. This is going to be a very different kind of review video. Hello everyone, welcome to another Made in Abyss Season 2 episode review. Today, we'll be talking about Episode 10, All That You Gather. Now, there is so much to talk about regarding this episode, but before we talk about the anime episode itself, I feel we really need to bring up the source material. Because while I did utter the word perfect, this episode did still have its imperfections as well. But hey, to clarify, they are minor. I cannot stress just how fucking good this adaptation is. There are plentiful cuts to dialogue though, and even an entire scene got the boot. While none of it felt integral to the storyline, they are worth mentioning. Also, Akihito-sensei wants to suck Marsan's butt. I didn't have a segue for that information, but I wanted to include it because of reasons? God, man, this is what happens when I don't have a script and have to speak from the heart, quote unquote. So regarding the manga, in the first sequence, Belaf briefly explains that when he was turned into a Narahade, he actually appeared to have lost his memory of all the events prior to the settlement inside of Iraburu. There is a genuine reason behind this, which will be explained in the next episode, well, I imagine. But if not, I'll explain that in the manga section of the next video. It is interesting though that I wasn't mentioned in this episode, as it actually has some importance in the story going forward. Also, this is what Veiko mentioned to Reg a while ago regarding how if Belaf saw that piece of Fapta, it would make him go crazy. During this scene as well, Nanachi refers to Midi as this treasured, which is just a direct reference to episode 13 when describing Midi as Nanachi's personal treasure. And I know I didn't include this minute detail, but it's so painful that I felt you needed to join me in my tears. Belaf also mentions that the smell of the memories implanted in Nanachi was supposed to lower the sense of judgment. And I really like this line because it showcases the kind of person Belaf truly is. The fact that he's trying to almost play devil's advocate and even bears some of the responsibility regarding Nanachi's irrationality towards staying with Midi forever instead of coexisting with the original group, saying that the only reason why Nanachi continued to stay was likely because of him. But Nanachi flat out denies this, and man, I love that. There's so much chemistry between these two in such a short amount of time. It's small lines like that that just pack an emotional wallop. Nanachi also apologizes to Midi for acting in their own best interest, saying that they went back on their promise to set her free by happily living their lives together under Belaf. People actually criticized this whole ordeal because it felt like Nanachi just wasted time and would eventually be set free by Belaf anyway, but I'd argue that this whole situation, as little portrayal as it actually got, is incredibly important. With Nanachi being forced to confront their past head-on, rather than having Reg do it for them, to it being what sets the needing for Vapta's limbs in motion in the first place, it kind of feels like the story couldn't have worked without it. Nanachi also mentions that they will learn more delicious dishes so that one day Midi will have the chance to taste them, which I mean, fucking stab me in the dick, man. That would hurt less. This dialogue, it's so painful, man. Moving on to Fapta's fight sequence, there is also a lot more Narahade dialogue during this little slap and tickle that gets cut out, with characters actually actively explaining the plan as it's unfolding. The anime cut that dialogue, but I think it works better for it because it's much easier to follow than the manga. Still, an interesting detail that I felt like bringing up. Due to time constraints, an entire sequence actually just got the boot. Reg actually confronts Fapta first, and then a small flashback plays when Reg first woke up and spoke with Riko about everything that's happening. In this flashback, Mugi notices the village drying spot has collapsed amongst the destruction. The drying spot being the place in which has the most sunlight and allows the Narahade of the village to dry their stuff if need be. She recalls the many customers she has had during her time here and the familiar faces of the villagers. She describes Iraburu as her hometown. Despite wanting to touch Fapta because she is the being with the most value, she doesn't want her village and all of those things precious to her to be destroyed. This is actually what drives Riko into stopping Fapta in the first place, But Riko actually can't do it by herself. She insists on saving the people of the village as they've saved her before. And this is what motivates Reg to confront Fapta once and for all. Also, during the first flashback sequence, Fapta describes the being that took out Gaburun as the Ryusazai. It's briefly mentioned in the anime, but the manga just outright tells you what the fiend is that defeated Gaburun in the first place. And this just demonstrates just how strong these beings actually are. When Reg is getting, well, manhandled by Fapta, I don't know how to describe what the fuck I'm seeing, if I'm honest. Riko is about to blow the white whistle, but Reg actually signals to her that she needs to wait. And no, it's not because he's enjoying himself. It was stated before in a previous chapter that the white whistle, when used, tires Riko out, which renders her weak and vulnerable. It's incredibly strange that the anime still hasn't mentioned this at this point, which is why Reg can't abuse that power. I'm sure it will come up later, but it feels like an important detail that should have been addressed a long time ago, as it makes using the white whistle feel like a last resort, as to not put Riko in any more danger. When Riko blows the whistle, Prushka's silhouette can also be seen. It kind of sucks that the anime cut this small thing out, because it felt like the emotion just hits a little harder every time we see precious Prushka on display. It also just reiterates how Prushka is experiencing all of Riko's emotions in real time. It really feels like she is with us, so it's a shame that they cut it. Also, this frame is just super badass. It's a slight nitpick, but, you know, one worth mentioning. Also, in the manga, Fapta manages to pierce Reg's belly button, which is just, ew. I bring this up because, my god, everyone and their dad seem to know his weak spot. When Gabu talks about the ones who pass by with the stones, he's referring to the white whistles. It's an easy oversight for anime only, so I felt the need to bring it up here. Fapta describes those people as scary, which just goes to show how insane the strength of white whistles actually are. We aren't sure exactly which white whistles they are talking about, but that being said, if Reg isn't scary like those people, and Fapta, who's immortal, fears these people, it's just insane to think how strong they actually are. This collision here actually also breaks Fapta's arms in the manga, but she being the Undying Princess, she quickly recovers, which I just think is metal as fuck. And finally, oh god, is this really the manga note I'm ending on? That's the problem when you try to do these things in chronological order. Alright, so Reg and Faputa have, implied happy fun times together shortly after Faputa creates a Reg statue as to not forget him. I don't think it's meant to be at all a sexual scene, despite what the implications are, as weird as that sounds. I think it's honestly just trying to be wholesome in the main Abyss way, but it's hard to translate those ideas into an anime form without it being strange, so. But that being said, they still gave her access to Reg's, well, Mickle Pickle. So anyway, that's it for the manga comparisons. Overall, the anime is just superior, man. I really don't have many major gripes at all with this episode. I genuinely think this adaptation is perfection, and I will talk your ears off like crazy in just a moment. But first, let's give a brief rundown of what happened in this episode, just so it's all fresh in your mind. We reconvene with Nanachi and Belaf after Fapta begins her reign of terror. With Fapta's return comes Belaf's memories of before Uruburu's creation, and he insists that he must head over there. He entrusts all his value and memories into Nanachi, solely because he believes that Nanachi is nothing like him. The implication being that Nanachi is still pure, while Belaf still bears the guilt that comes with feasting on Iremui's children. Letting Nanachi go, however, comes with a cost. Everyone who was made inside of the village cannot leave the village, meaning that if Nanachi transcends the boundary with this version of Midi, which was created inside of the village, it will disappear. After lots of thought, Nanachi overcomes their indecisiveness and decides to head towards Fapta to help Reg and Riko. They carry Midi to the boundary and promise to see her again someday. Midi then disappears, and Belaf, passing the boundary, begins to crumble. And then, unironically, one of the most fucking depressing things I've ever seen happens. Pigumu and his crew carry Nanachi's hat with them, despite knowing what passing through the boundary would do to them. The hat has changed colour as it's been infused with both Belaf and the Pigumu's posse of purposely precious pals value. Rest in peace, my precious little sausage friend. God, man, like, this was so sad! Like, I saw them for 10 seconds, why am I feeling like this? With plenty of value now in Nanachi's hands, they and Belaf continue onwards to confront Fapta. Reg awakens after using the incinerator and 2 hours have passed. Fapta has already devoured plentiful of the village and seems to have undergone a beastly transformation. Consumed by her rage, she insists on the eradication of the village and seems unstoppable. But Reg steps up to the plate and decides to do whatever he can to try to stop her. As they're about to fight, the first flashback plays. Gaburun has been knocked out cold from a Ryusazai and Fapta is left helpless. She encounters a wandering Reg who doesn't speak the same language. Reg, noticing the damaged interference unit, decides to help, only to be interrupted by Fapta's stressful nature. We cut back to Reg and Fapta in real time, and Fapta's siblings heal her wounds. Reg's attempts at fighting back are less than effective, and Fapta manhandles him. Well, kind of. I don't really know how to describe this scene. And it's even worse in the manga, I'll tell you what. Reg says that Fapta needs more grace as she's a princess, and this sparks another memory in Fapta. In this memory, Reg and Fapta exchange names and other things, and Reg tells her to be more graceful. This prompts her using the word Sosu, as Gabiroon says that Sosu was the word in her mother's language that means grace. Also, I love this little dynamic between these two. Gabu and Fapta are so fucking cute, man. Reg, being the little nervous wreck that he is, offers his goggles to Fapta as a token of goodwill, and for a way to cover up. And she says it smells like him, which then leads us back to the fight in real time. Reg losing this fight, and with time running out, decides to use the power of the White Whistle to ward off Fapta. One incredible fight sequence later, and we learn that Fapta was the one who took Prushka in the first place when she was just a life-reverberating stone, because Prushka, and I quote, felt cramped. There are multiple other reasons, but that one sticks out the most, and we'll get back to that in a minute. The iron rain begins to fall, and the inhabitants can't handle it for much longer. Waisakin then uses his Naruhade body to extend his limbs in order to shield the village from the scorching rain. And the rain is what transitions us to the final flashback sequence of this episode. Fapta explains to Reg her goal and why Reg is essential to getting inside the village. Reg says that once he finds his Haku, he'll return with them and they will bring her wish to fruition. And not only that, but he says that once her dream comes true, they can together venture the rest of the abyss. He asks her to wait until then and she happily agrees. Oh man, I love the character chemistry in this episode, dude. I can't stress it enough. Reg departs, leaving Fapta behind, but lots of time passes, and there is no sign of him. It's unclear exactly how much time has passed, but as we know, time travels differently in the Abyss, in particular at a faster speed. The implications are that it's been a very long time, as Faputa is getting super depressed just thinking about how much longer she'll have to wait before they reunite. We cut back to my absolute favourite panel in the entire manga, and Reg has recalled various glimpses of the past. These brief moments of history overcome his thoughts and emotions, resulting in his White Whistle power-up slowly overturning. And as a result of Reg's kindness, Fapta is able to overthrow him, and then the episode ends. Now the moment I've been yearning for. Let's talk about this episode, man. There is so much. So first and foremost, I gotta sing my praises to the animation work in this episode, straight away. This has been some of the slickest animation I have seen in anime all year. From the more somber sequences that are filled with just so much life, to the more intense battle animations that played throughout. I don't know how much acid the team were doing when they put this together, but I want all of it. I cannot imagine the many sleepless nights and the amount of work that went into this episode, dude. But thank you, Kinema Citrus, for bringing this entire story to life the way you have. With this episode in particular, you've truly outdone yourselves. The musical scores were also fan-fucking-tastic, dude. The fact that the first theme that plays in the entire season got the full treatment was just a nice surprise. And the way in which the series used Katodina has been incredible. While its previous placement seemed a little strange, it was more than fitting for this sequence. In my adaptation, I actually used a musical score that featured lyrics for this moment too. But in my arrogance, the track that I should have used was always under my nose. Of course I used Katodina. Why wouldn't they have? Also gonna throw some love to my gals, Maria Issei and Misaka Kuno. You both pulled off a stellar performance in this episode. The emotions were not just visibly there, but just in the way they delivered their lines got me choked up several times. I don't think any pair could have done these characters' interactions the justice it truly deserves better than these two. One thing that I will say that I'm actually really impressed with is actually how quickly they were able to get through chapter 54, but still make that scene hit. While I do believe this episode would have benefited greatly from removing the outro sequence entirely to allow the first act to breathe a bit more, I still felt misty-eyed watching Nanachi let go of Midi a second time. An entire chapter was actually cleared in exactly 8 minutes and 18 seconds. And I don't think that pace fazed me too much, to be honest. My favourite thing, by the way, about this chapter is the way in which it handles its parallel editing. So when that first episode dropped, I was more than thrilled to eventually see this chapter, which has a heavy focus on back and forth storytelling, being adapted in the near future. And by God, did they go above and beyond. From the genius tear transition, which did not translate super well in the manga, but was so beautifully demonstrated in the anime, to the seamless helmet snatch, from the sound edit when Fapta exclaims her name, which brilliantly segues to Gabu explaining how Reg is trying to break the language barrier between them by finding common ground in their names, the fucking perfect transition from the Iron Rain, and finally that here at the end. Like, you couldn't have done this better. The storyboarding and direction in this episode is unrivaled, dude. God, I'm just so proud of everyone involved in this season. I don't know how this series manages to captivate me as much as it does, but I'm loving it more and more as the series goes on. The Reg transformation sequence, by the way, oh my god, hype as shit. I had no idea the steam from his boots was so hot that they literally melted the ground around him. This is my second favorite panel in the entire manga, and this anime did it more than the justice it deserves. The sheen effect was clean, and I really like the fact that there is a bit of lag between the transformation. It's like a nice touch, as if the sound is faster than his transformation. Now, some things to note, by the way. Nanachi recognized that the force field is seeping through the village, and if you know your main Abyss history, you know that's a really big problem. Because now it's not just Fupuda they have to worry about, but something else. Another important detail that gets overlooked is that Vapta mentions that she stole Prushka for multiple reasons, but the one in particular that really sticks out is how Prushka felt cramped in the form of a life reverberating stone. This confirms that Vapta not only deliberately led the trio into the village in episode 2, but also has the unique ability to communicate with the literal white whistles themselves. Another thing worth mentioning is Wazuken's body this episode. Remember how we stated that the Naruhade in this village take form based on their desires, and how I've been insisting that Wazuken isn't a villain but a leader who'll do whatever it takes to protect his people? I mean, the dude literally has a hardening ability to do exactly that, even at the expense of his own body. Like, come on man, he's the fucking man. I also really liked how they handled the more weird aspects of this chapter. While it's definitely a lot more visually intense in the manga, I like that the anime kind of kept its weird antics to a bit more of an accessible level. I think these decisions, while they don't give you the full weirdness that is the main Abyss experience, I'd argue they do just the right amount. I just think these storyboard changes are a lot more effective and a lot less suggestive. Just a neat way to present some truly insane ideas. And finally, I want to talk about my absolute favourite moment in this entire series, and my favourite manga panel of all time. This sequence. This beautiful sequence. I got the same level of goosebumps that played in the first episode all over again, man. But it's different this time because I've read the source material and still felt choked up. You can really feel all the pent-up emotions emanating in this scene. While Reg doesn't fully remember everything, the glimpses alone are enough to pull apart his transformation. I love how in tune these characters are with their emotions as well. Vapta will do whatever it takes to bring her mother liberation, no matter how dirty she must play. And Reg, man, no matter how physically strong and indestructible he is still fueled by emotions and gives into them despite the harsh reality of his circumstances. I love that this series just knows exactly how a child's mind would work. And that's what I love about this series. It treats its characters with such care and such depth, and I don't think I've seen a better representation of children in a fantasy-like setting better than Main Abyss. This entire episode, man, it just feels like a stage play, where the prince is doing whatever he can to save the princess from herself, but the princess just feels no need for a savior, you know? Like, I'll go on forever if I keep talking, and it's 3:30 in the morning as of writing this. Holy shit, I have work in like a few hours. I need to get this done. I think that'll be all from me for today. Overall, this is truly Main Abyss at its peak, and I'm so glad that when I said we could possibly be getting the best episode of Main Abyss so far, I wasn't proven wrong. Because, my god, while my second favorite chapter of all time is still coming up inside of a 40-minute plus episode, I don't know how they can outdo themselves now. This is honestly a new time high for this series, and I'm so proud of it. But hey, this season has been full of surprises all the way through, so I'm more than happy to be surprised again. Y'all, thank you so much for watching this video and listening to me just ramble in a bit more heartfelt of a manner. I mean this when I say Main Abyss has genuinely changed my life, and I'm just so proud to be able to share these moments with you all. And above all else, I'm just so proud of what's been achieved with it. Thank you for listening to me, fangirl, and please in the comments, give me paragraphs. Tell me everything that's on your mind right now. With that, I shall bid you a farewell until next week, where actually my most popular video on the channel will be getting adapted, and boy oh boy, is it an insane chapter by Main Abyss standards. Plenty of insane animation and gore, lots and lots of gore to come. On that note, I'm heading out. Till next week, where I shall see you all even deeper in the Abyss.